Love in the Numbers. Chapter 1, The Accidental Revelation. Nathan Bates was, by any objective measure, a highly average student. He got solid B's in English, managed a struggling C+ in history, and in his regular math classes, he hovered safely in the middle. His defining characteristic was not genius, but tenacity, a trait that, until a year ago, he'd applied exclusively to video games and convincing himself that instant ramen was a balanced meal. Now, all his energy, all his focus, all his tenacity was poured into a single, terrifying goal: earning a seat at the International Math Olympiad, IMO, training table. Specifically, the battered laminate table in room 314 of West Northrup High, where 5 of the most terrifyingly brilliant minds in the state huddled every afternoon. Nathan wasn't chasing a gold medal. He was chasing proximity. He was chasing Rachael Lee. Rachael was a legend at West Northrup, whispered about in hushed, reverent tones. Not because of her looks, few students had ever truly seen her looks, but because of her brain. She was a prodigy of abstract algebra and number theory, possessing a mind that could untangle complexity like others' untied shoelaces. Her daily uniform was designed for maximum invisibility. Thick, black, chunky glasses that magnified her eyes to a cartoonish size. The secret was revealed to him. It was a year ago, during a pre-calculus study session. He'd been fumbling a textbook, and she'd been attempting a complicated geometric proof on the whiteboard. The sun, slanting low through the window, had caught her. Distracted by her own focused frustration over a forgotten constant, Rachael had done the unthinkable. With one quick, impatient swipe of her hand, she had pushed the entire curtain of bangs and the thick glasses up, away from her face, resting them high on her head. High cheekbones, the perfectly shaped lips, and the large, luminous dark eyes that, unmagnified by the lenses, were instantly arresting. She looked like a classic movie star, her features elegant, framed by the dark, heavy hair. It was a face built for spotlights and red carpets, not for solving quadratic inequalities in room 402. Then, just as quickly, the glasses were down, the bangs settled, and the beautiful secret was locked away again. But for Nathan, the equation of his life had changed forever. He was X, and he had just solved for Y, the most beautiful Y he'd ever seen. He knew then and there, he had to win her heart. And the only path to the heart of the math prodigy was through the Math Olympiad Team. The path to the team had been a brutal, 365-day gauntlet of self-inflicted torture. Nathan replaced Friday night movies with advanced placement textbooks. He traded his casual friends for an endless stream of complex logic puzzles. He started seeing the world as a series of interlocking algebraic systems, a deliberate, strategic sacrifice of his mental health purely for love. He wasn't a genius, but he was stubborn. He learned to work harder than anyone else, bridging the gap between talent and tenacity with sheer agonizing effort. When the coach, Mr. Ellington, posted the final 5-person roster for the Olympiad training, the most prestigious team selection in the school's history, Nathan's stomach plummeted. Nathan Bates. He stared at his own name. He'd done it. He had mathematically engineered his way into the exclusive orbital path of Rachael Lee. He looked over at her. Rachael, already sitting at the table, was meticulously sharpening 3 pencils, unaware that the newest member of her elite cohort was operating not on logarithms, but on infatuation. "Welcome, Bates," said a crisp, cutting voice. This was Anya Sharma, the team's other superstar. Anya was Rachael's opposite, sharp, flawlessly put together, and intensely competitive. If Rachael was a quiet genius, Anya was a hyper-efficient machine built for winning. Anya looked at Nathan not with contempt, but with the ruthless curiosity of someone calculating the load-bearing capacity of a cheap shelf. "Your scores were inconsistent," Anya stated, pushing her perfect gold-rimmed glasses up her nose. Your work on the Dirichlet distribution was adequate, but your combinatorial geometry, a disaster. Just don't slow down Rachel's preparation. Nathan swallowed, determined not to let his carefully constructed facade of serious math enthusiast crumble. I'm here to learn, Sharma, and to contribute. Rachel, without looking up, said in her low, almost musical voice, Anya. The team is 5. We are 4, plus the coach. He is a statement of mathematical fact. To Nathan, it was the sweetest integration problem he'd ever heard. The first official session began. Nathan was sitting across the table from the object of his obsession, a pile of advanced problem sets between them. He was a fraud in a room full of wizards, and his heart was beating a panicked rhythm that would break any metronome. He was finally close enough to touch her, but now he had to actually talk to her about things like Euler's totient function. He realized his strategic ascent was only Act 1. Act 2, winning her over, was going to require a lot more than just hard work. It was going to require a miracle. Chapter 2, The Geometry of Proximity. The Olympiad training schedule was brutal. 2 hours every day after school and 4 hours every Saturday. Room 314 became Nathan's entire universe, a place where he existed solely to absorb complex theories and steal fleeting glances at Rachael Lee. The math squad was a strange, functional ecosystem. Anya, the hawk, precision and efficiency personified. She despised inefficiency and often made Nathan the target of her cutting remarks. Leo, the laid-back genius. He wore Hawaiian shirts and solved complex proofs while scrolling TikTok. He was friendly to Nathan, mostly because he saw Nathan's struggle as entertainment. Marcus, the silent, intense geometry expert. He communicated only in diagrams and grunts. Rachel, the center of the intellectual solar system. She rarely spoke unless to deliver a devastatingly concise solution or an explanation that made Nathan feel like his brain was made of cotton wool. Rachel's shyness was almost physical. She didn't just avoid eye contact, she seemed to create a personal no-fly zone around herself. Her bangs and glasses acted like emotional camouflage. When she spoke, she tended to address the whiteboard, the ceiling, or, occasionally, a pencil sharpener. Nathan's role quickly solidified into 2 functions. 1, the designated note-taker, because his handwriting was readable and his brain was too slow to be solving problems in real time. And 2, Rachel's strategic proximity target. During one particularly grueling session on non-Euclidean geometry, Nathan hit a wall. He stared at the hyperbolic geometry proof laid out on the whiteboard, feeling a dizzying disconnect between the abstract concept and his physical reality. I don't get it, he finally confessed, his voice heavy with genuine frustration. I can calculate the angles, but I can't see the space. It doesn't feel real. Rachel, who had been hunched over her desk calculating a series of complex curvatures, finally spoke. She didn't look at him, but addressed the air immediately above his head. The problem, Nathan, is that you are attempting to project a spherical concept onto a planar surface, she said, her voice soft but clear. You're trying to use a Euclidean map for a hyperbolic universe. The space is real. Your assumptions about its shape are just limited. She didn't stop there. She reached out with her pencil and tapped his notebook exactly where he had drawn a faulty diagram. Her hand, small and pale, was surprisingly close to his. Nathan's mind, which should have been focused on hyperbolic tiling, screamed with delight over the 0.5 centimeter proximity of their forearms. She then pulled a small, colorful rubber band from her pencil case and stretched it over a small curved surface. This is how you must visualize the space. It's about the constraints of the surface itself, not the constraints of the line. The simple physical analogy finally clicked in Nathan's. He understood the math, but more importantly, he understood a tiny piece of her. "Wow, Rachel," he said, genuinely impressed. "That was actually beautiful." A flicker of color, a faint blush, appeared high on her cheekbones, almost completely hidden by her hair. She quickly withdrew her hand and turned back to her work, as if embarrassed by the compliment. "It is only applied topology," she mumbled to the desk. Nathan had scored a point, not on a test, but in the complex, non-Euclidean geometry of the human heart. He doubled down on his efforts, fueled by this tiny success. He began to apply his tenacity to the logistical problems of the training room. He noticed that Rachel always forgot her water bottle, that she liked the temperature exactly 2 degrees cooler than the rest of the room, and that she had a strange, almost childlike obsession with certain types of imported Japanese snacks. His pursuit shifted from mere academic achievement to a calculus of care. His devotion was subtle, designed not to scare the intensely shy creature he was trying to attract. One Saturday morning, Rachel arrived looking particularly drawn and tired. She was wearing a slightly oversized dark gray hoodie, her full hermit crab mode. Nathan had spent the previous evening tracking down a rare strawberry mochi snack he knew she liked. As she sat down, he casually slid a small, unmarked paper bag across the table. Rachel paused her pencil sharpening ritual. She looked at the bag, then slowly raised her gaze to the area just past Nathan's left ear. "Pi did not bring any sustenance treats to math sessions. It's a morale coefficient. It increases cognitive function by 15%, according to my anecdotal data." Rachel slowly opened the bag, revealed the mochi, and then, for the first time, a small, genuine smile actually tugged at the corners of her lips. It was brief, hidden by her bangs, but Nathan saw it. She took a tiny bite. "The consistency is optimal," she decreed. Anya, watching the exchange with the cold cynicism of a security camera, leaned over. "Bates, are you attempting to bribe her into tutoring you on the Cauchy-Riemann equations?" "I'm attempting to optimize team efficiency, Sharma," Nathan retorted, holding her gaze. Anya just narrowed her eyes and went back to solving her problem. Nathan knew he was in the game. He wasn't just solving for X anymore, he was influencing the entire system. He was making the environment optimally comfortable for Rachael Lee. The path to love was apparently paved with advanced math and high-quality Japanese snacks. Chapter 3. The Calculus of Care. As the weeks bled into months, the pressure from the Olympiad intensified, but the tension between Nathan and Rachel began to relax. Nathan was still struggling with the advanced concepts. He knew he was the weakest link, but his determination meant he was constantly asking relevant, insightful questions. He was the essential translator, bridging the gap between genius and the average brain. One afternoon, Mr. Ellington gave them a brutally difficult practice test, forcing them to solve a complex functional equation under intense time pressure. Rachel, despite her brilliance, often struggled with speed in the initial stages. She would pause, staring intensely, waiting for the entire structure of the problem to reveal itself before committing to a single line of calculation. Nathan, watching her, noticed the subtle signs of her mounting stress. Her pencil tapped a frantic rhythm, and her fingers clenched the edge of her desk. He knew she would solve it, but the time pressure was causing her to spiral into her shell. He finished the easy parts of his own test, the ones he could brute force, and realized he had 15 minutes remaining. His focus was now entirely on Rachel. He remembered Devin's lesson from the stage fright swap. The mask works until the role becomes real. Nathan had started playing the role of the dedicated, caring math partner. Now the care was real. He looked around the blank sheet of paper, drew a complex function symbol, phi, and then drew a simple cartoon version of his face beside it, complete with a tiny, ridiculous mustache. He folded the paper into a neat, tiny square.
Then, using his sleeve to mask the motion, he slid the paper across the table, not to Rachel's workspace, but onto the floor near her shoe. Rachel paused, her head slightly tilted. She glanced down, then at the paper. With an almost invisible motion, she retrieved it, cupping it in her hand below the level of the desk. She slowly unfolded it. When she saw the function symbol and the cartoon mustache, her lips twitched. The sound was so faint, Nathan almost missed it. A tiny, suppressed giggle, like a mouse sighing contentedly. She quickly folded the paper back up, slid it into the pocket of her jeans, and then, without looking up, her hand unclenched. She took a slow, deep breath and picked up her pencil. The frantic tapping stopped. She began writing the final, complex solution for the functional equation. She solved it perfectly, with 3 minutes to spare. After the session, the team packed up. Anya gave Nathan a suspicious look. "Why were you done early, Bates? Did you give up on the functional equation?" "No," Nathan said, gathering his things. "I just finished my calculation of the optimal distribution of team anxiety. It needed a slight adjustment." Rachel was waiting near the door. The other students filed past. "The anxiety distribution was successful," Rachel murmured, looking at the floor tiles. She hesitated, then spoke a sentence that rattled Nathan to his core. "You did not have to work so hard. You are already a good person, Nathan. The mathematical competence is secondary. You are already a good person." She had peeled back a layer of his carefully constructed facade and seen the foundation beneath. The fear that his efforts were purely shallow, purely for her beauty, began to dissolve.
He was trying hard because he cared about her, and in the process, he had become someone who actually could care for others. He matched her quiet tone. "I didn't start doing the math to be a good person, Rachel. I think I started doing the math, and then I became a better one." Rachel finally looked up. Her glasses, thick as they were, couldn't hide the intensity of her dark eyes. "That is the true beauty of integration," she said softly. Chapter 4. The Theorem of Truth. 2 weeks before the Olympiad, the pressure peaked. The team was working on their final weakness, the lightning-fast, highly specific multiple-choice section that required near-instant recall of obscure formulas. The team was gathered late one Thursday night. The only light came from the fluorescent tubes in the ceiling and the single desk lamp illuminating their chaotic cluster of notebooks. Rachel was struggling with a complex formula related to modular arithmetic. She was so deep in concentration that her bangs had naturally fallen away from her face, pulled back by the sheer force of her concentration, exposing her forehead and cheekbones. She had also unconsciously slid her glasses down her nose to look at the paper more closely, leaving her stunning eyes framed by the thick lenses. She looked simultaneously brilliant, frustrated, and, to Nathan, radiantly beautiful. He was sitting next to her, genuinely wrestling with the same problem, no longer faking his effort. "It's a false conjugate," Rachel muttered, biting her lip in concentration. "The structure suggests symmetry, but the core element is asymmetrical." "The asymmetry is intentional," Nathan murmured, his voice low. He wasn't looking at her face, he was looking at the paper. "The question is testing whether we assume the structure is given, or if we test the structure itself. It's a trick of expectation." Rachel paused. She turned her head slightly to look at him. This time, she didn't look past his ear. She looked at him. Her eyes, magnified and intense, held his. "A trick of expectation," she repeated, her voice a near whisper. Nathan felt his heart stutter. The beautiful face was close enough to touch, but the intensity of her focus made him see something more profound than beauty. He saw the fire of intellect, the agony of effort, and the sheer, unyielding dedication of her mind. He was no longer staring at a beautiful movie star. He was staring at the soul of his partner. "It's why I missed it 3 times, Nathan admitted, his own carefully guarded secrets tumbling out. "I kept expecting it to be the simple conjugate.
I'm not a genius, Rachel. I have to work 10 times harder than Leo and 20 times harder than you just to keep up. I'm a brute force processor. I compensate for lack of talent with sheer input volume. Rachel held his gaze. But you did see the trick of expectation, she countered quietly. You saw the asymmetry, and Leo and Anya missed it. They assumed the structure is given. You question the structure because you had to build your own from the ground up. She pushed her glasses up, resting them in her hair. And this time, the gesture was slow and deliberate. Her eyes, large and clear, looked directly into his. No bangs, no magnification, no barrier. I hide, she confessed, her voice thick with vulnerability. I hide behind the hair and the glasses. I am afraid of the attention. When I was younger, the other students didn't see my mind, only the exterior. They thought I was silly or that I must be easy to fool because I was quiet and looked different. If I hide, they have to address the math first. They have to address the function, not the variable. Nathan was breathless. He reached across the table, not for her hand, but for the complex functional equation they had been solving. He underlined the asymmetrical element. I started this whole thing because of the exterior, Nathan admitted, his voice rough. I saw your face without the mask, and I was stunned. I joined the team to be close to a beautiful girl. That was my initial condition. He looked up at her, his eyes honest. But somewhere in the last 6 months, that equation changed. Now, I stay because I saw how you solve for the asymmetrical element. I stay because you can see the difference between a brute force processor and a genuine insight. I stay because you trust the logic of a simple paper mustache to break a spiral of anxiety. He gently took the glasses from her head and placed them on the table. The variable is beautiful, Rachel, but the function is why I love you. The silence that followed was absolute, filled only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Rachel's face was completely exposed, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. Nathan, she began, her voice barely a breath. He leaned across the table. He didn't rush. He closed the small distance between them, and their first kiss was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, earnest confirmation. A perfect, solved equation of feeling. Chapter 5. The Final Equation. The Math Olympiad was held at the State University, a massive, impersonal lecture hall filled with hundreds of the country's most dedicated young mathematicians. The air was thick with the silent, suffocating tension of intellectual combat. Nathan and Rachel, now officially a couple, entered the hall together. They had confessed their feelings, but they hadn't had a proper, non-math-related date yet. Their romantic bond had been forged in the high-pressure crucible of differential equations. Rachel was still wearing her familiar heavy glasses and the long bangs. She squeezed Nathan's hand briefly before they separated to find their seats. An acknowledgement that the mask was still useful in this environment, but its power over her was gone. Remember the flow, Nathan whispered to her. Act 1, survey the space. Act 2, attack the functional equations. Trust your structure. Rachel nodded, her lips forming a tiny, confident curve. And you, Nathan, attack the problem, not the clock. Your solution is valid, even if it's inefficient. The 4-hour test began. Nathan, for the first time, didn't panic. He saw the exam not as a terrifying judgment, but as the final, massive problem set in a year-long class he had aced through sheer effort. He followed his own advice, meticulously working through the easier combinatorial problems first, building his confidence. He managed to solve 2 of the hardest geometry problems, not through genius, but by remembering Rachel's simple, physical visualization of hyperbolic space. He was still a brute force processor, but he was a smart brute force processor, guided by love. Rachel, freed from the internal pressure of perfection, approached the test with a focused calm. She flew through the abstract algebra, and when she hit the hardest section, the functional equations, she paused.
She pushed back her bangs and gently removed her glasses, placing them on the desk. This was not a moment of weakness, but a conscious choice of clarity. She saw the problem not as a fortress to be stormed, but as a friend to be understood. She was the first student in the hall to put down her pen, submitting her paper with 20 minutes remaining. She hadn't rushed, she was simply done. Nathan finished his paper a minute before the bell. He didn't win. Outside the hall, the team regrouped. Leah was laughing about a ridiculous error he'd made. Anya was already analyzing the weaknesses of the test design. Mr. Ellington finally arrived with a clipboard. Results are provisional, but I have the rough rankings. Rachel, you placed second overall, an incredible achievement, Lee. Rachel smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that lit up her entire face, bangs and all. And Nathan, Mr. Ellington continued, your final scores, well, they are not high enough for a medal, but your improvement factor is off the charts. You ranked in the top 20%. Considering where you started, Bates, that is extraordinary. Anya scoffed softly. The top 20% is fine for an average person, but this is the Olympiad, Bates. Rachel turned to Anya, her smile fading into a focused intensity. Anya, the objective function was to maximize team performance, not individual ego. Nathan's consistent improvement raised the mean of the group's practice scores by 3.4%. His effort coefficient was the highest on the team. He may not have placed first, but his contribution was maximal. Anya blinked, stunned into silence by Rachel's fierce defense. Nathan simply looked at Rachel, his heart full. He had achieved more than a medal. He had earned her respect and love. That evening, they skipped the informal celebratory dinner. They walked in the cool evening air of the university campus. I need to confess one more thing, Nathan said, stopping her under a cluster of ancient oak trees. I didn't just join for your beauty. When I saw your face, I realized I was living an unexamined life. I had to force myself to become the kind of person who could even speak to someone like you. The math, it was the catalyst. It made me better, Rachel. Rachel reached up, revealing her full, luminous beauty. She looked directly into his eyes. No glasses needed. And I needed your chaos, Nathan, she whispered. My world was too ordered, too predictable. You showed me that you can achieve optimal results not just through pure efficiency, but through dedicated, messy, ridiculous love. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small velvet-covered box. Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain holding a tiny, perfect Mobius strip. It's a non-orientable surface, Rachel explained, her voice shy but firm. It has only one side and one boundary. It symbolizes the continuous, intertwined path of our two journeys. We are forever connected. The inside is the outside. The beginning is the end. Nathan took the necklace, his hands trembling. It's the most beautiful equation I've ever seen. He fastened it around her neck. He pulled her close again, and this kiss was the proof, the elegant solution to their long, complicated problem. It was the ultimate, perfect answer to the question, what is love? Epilogue. 2 years later, Nathan and Rachel were freshmen at MIT, roommates in the same dorm suite, separate rooms, of course, much to Leo's disappointment. They were still studying together, but the context had shifted. Nathan was still working absurdly hard, specializing in computer science, using his brute force dedication to master complex coding. Rachel was a legend in the math department, already advising PhD students. One rainy Friday night, they were sitting in Nathan's room. Rachel was struggling with a complex topology problem. She had her glasses on, her bangs down, and her lips were moving in silent calculation. Nathan was watching her, not with the stunned, starstruck gaze of the boy who first saw her face, but with the warm, fond affection of a man who loved her mind. It's the planar embedding, Nathan, she sighed, running a hand through her hair, pushing back her bangs and glasses in one familiar, frustrated gesture.
It defies the planar embedding. It shouldn't be this hard. Nathan leaned over, not to solve the equation, but to kiss the exposed skin of her temple. "It's a trick of expectation, love," he murmured. "The problem assumes one boundary. But in our universe, there are two. You and me. Always." Rachael smiled, took a deep breath, and turned back to the problem, her eyes shining. The complexity was still there, but now so was the joy. Love, they both knew, was not found in the easy answers, but in the beautiful, messy, non-orientable surface of their shared struggle. It was, finally and forever, love in the numbers.